Yep.
Good Friday morning, friends. Welcome to this week's episode of Finding God in the Dark. My name is Pastor Don Stevens. I'm serving Asbury UMC in Woodstown, St. John's UMC in Harrisonville.
And I am Jonathan Campbell. I'm the pastor of Lacey United Methodist Church in Forked River, New Jersey.
And this week, the film that we are going to discuss is the 2015 do we call it a boxing film?
That's possible.
It's a boxing film called Creed. It is basically I think it's fair to call it a spin-off of the
Yeah,
Rocky franchise.
definitely.
Which has spawned its own little franchise. It's now up to 3 films, but this is the first of the 3 films.
Yeah.
Again, came out in 2015. It is a drama, stars Michael B. Jordan, Sylvester Stallone, Tessa Thompson, directed by Ryan Coogler. The one award that I saw come up consistently for this was it had several nominations for Best Supporting Actor for
Yeah.
Stallone.
Yeah.
He did win, I think, a Critics' Choice and a Golden Globe for that. Did not win the Academy Award, but
Yeah.
um, and Jonathan picked this from a list of films I had not seen previously. So my first impression, I felt the film comes off very much like the original Rocky. You know, this sort of underdog, overcoming the odds kind of story. I think the twist in it is that the original Rocky film, he was very much a lone wolf, whereas this film, it's really, particularly, it's about like almost a father-son relationship,
Yeah.
and
Definitely runs a lot
sort of a
different.
missing father relationship.
And a kind of a replacement father as well, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and if you will, an adoptive father. That resonates with me.
Yeah.
you know and you too, right? I mean,
Yeah.
one of your sons is
Yep.
adopted. Yeah,
Yes.
so that's it hit home, at least for that.
Yeah.
Was a good film. I enjoyed it, you
Yeah.
know
It's
uh kept my attention. Wasn't a bad movie. um like I said, I think it was very much like the original Rocky. What was that, 1976? I think it came out,
yep. Yep.
something like that. And even in its ending. Now, I did read that they had filmed a different ending, but they didn't use the other ending that they filmed.
Yeah.
But anyway, where did you go with this one, Jonathan?
Uh, it's important um film for the director and the star because it really changed their lives. Uh, it made both Coogler and Michael B. Jordan famous in ways they weren't before.
Right.
Um, so that's kind of important for them. And it was also important because it shows Stallone, for all the goofiness we can make fun of with Stallone, and he deserves a lot of it. He he can also act. He acted. I mean, he did an amazing job
Yeah.
of of playing this character and bringing kind of his end of life stuff in a lot of ways to kind of to bear about the idea of losing everybody that you really loved, you really connected with, and kind of struggling about giving up versus like leaning into the rest of your life, even though that means you have to create something new again.
Right.
Um, and that was he did that really well. Um,
Well, there's a real life angle to that
yeah, yeah,
you're aware of. Okay.
yeah, the picture. If you don't know, Stallone's son, who was in Rocky 5, um, he in real life died of a drug overdose. I believe it was
Mhm.
drug overdose. Um,
Yeah.
and even though in the movie, the fourth movie where he has a son that old, it's not his actual son. The picture that they show in his room of him and the son boxing when he was really little is his actual son.
Right.
So he actually asked that picture to be in the scene because he thought it would help him act the emotion of it. which is was pretty impressive that you'd be willing to do that because that
Yeah.
would, I mean, that would be hard. Um, I don't know. I think for me, this movie is interesting because you're right. It it hits a lot of the same notes of different points of the Rocky film, especially the first one. But it also Coogler does a nice way of twisting stuff and bringing new angles to it, which I thought was nice and I liked. For me, yeah, the thing that kept popping up, there's kind of two things, and we maybe we could play with both of them.
Sure.
But one of the lines is life is always about choices. Rocky says that at one point. And I think that's always an interesting theme to think about as a Christian. What does that mean? How do we live into that? And then the other piece is the generation to generation stuff. You
Mhm.
know, um, if you study family dynamics at all, and I'm sure your wife has probably has books
No,
on it.
I have too. I've done a little bit of
Yeah,
that. The I did a workshop on it, on conflict resolution. It was all based around family dynamics. Yeah.
it's spooky how things go from generation to generation, things you wouldn't expect. Things like children dying young, and you're like, why would that, why would, you and like you'll see weird patterns in families that
Mhm.
don't seem to make sense, and yet there's this thing that your stuff that you have in your life flows down to your kids and your grandkids and your great grandkids, whether you expect it or not. And you see that in this movie with the reality that the Adonis character, the B. Jordan character, is always struggling to figure out who his dad was, who his dad is for him, and how he's going to be kind of a man. You know,
Right.
that's a constant kind of theme in the
Is he
movie.
going to be his own man or live in
Yeah,
his dad's shadow?
yeah,
In fact, one of the outbursts he has is when somebody calls him Little Creed.
yeah.
That's an interesting dynamic in there. Yeah.
And
There were a number of those when we talk about
yeah,
the quotes in the film.
yeah,
Um, one of the ones I thought resonated with me was when they were working out in the gym
yeah,
and he has him shadow boxing the mirror.
yeah,
And Rocky points to the mirror. He says, "That's the toughest opponent you're ever going to have. You're ever
yeah.
going to have to face, yourself." And I mean, it is so true.
Mhm.
I know, personally at least, going through the process of getting to where I am today,
Yeah,
my biggest challenge was me.
yeah,
You know, so yeah, that was I thought that was really impactful. I thought it was impactful um when Adonis first meets Rocky in the restaurant and he asks him, how did you beat how did you beat my dad?
yeah,
Because he said he was the best boxer ever. Well,
yeah,
how did you beat him? Time.
yeah,
Time beat Apollo. Time's undefeated, he said.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And then you get things like, I can't remember the exact quote, but conversation between Rocky and Adonis about people being driven by fear or anger. And that's also a big reality, I think, of the Christian message is, people, and I don't know if this is accurate, people love to throw around the idea that there are 365 times in the Bible it says, do not be afraid. You know, this idea
That
of,
true? I'd have to look that up.
that's what I'm saying. I don't, I've heard it so many times. I doubt it's actually true, but people say it so often.
So
But,
yeah, some things just get said so often it must be true, right?
but that idea, I think, is a poignant aspect of Christianity is this call not to live in fear,
Yeah.
not to be defined by fear. And to be honest, also not to be defined by anger. And yet, because those emotions are so close to the surface of who we all are, it's really hard to break away from those emotions and not be driven by them.
Yeah.
And how we do that, how we're called to do that, often comes out in the Christian tradition as, okay, you've got to work on your discipline. You've got to work on getting up in the morning. You got to work on eating well. You've got to work on praying on a regular schedule. You got to, you know, and I've found in my own life a real struggle with discipline. But it's also something I recognize will be the catalyst for the change I often want. Um, I know you can speak to that well about your weight loss journey recently. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
but what's interesting, I don't know if you have experienced this, but I feel like I get so much pushback when I talk from, especially from the pulpit, about the importance of discipline. And I don't know if people hear it as you guys really are bad, and you guys are losers. I don't know if like we switch on uh this kind of Tony Robbins thing in our head, and we think we're going to get yelled at, and so we just shut down. But I feel like in Bible studies and um and in sermons, people often poo-poo the idea of discipline matters. Discipline will help radically change your life. And what is always powerful and always the point of sports movies in general, but especially things like boxing, where it is just you and your opponent. Boxing movies always boil down to who's more disciplined, who and that's what the montages are about, right? The training montages are about showing you who's more disciplined. I mean, that's what it's about. That's what they're
Right.
about.
Yeah, and it sounds like maybe some of our people need to read more Richard Foster.
Or Wesley, for God's
Or
sakes.
John Wesley. Well, it's funny because you were talking about, all of that discipline, and I'm thinking, yeah, there's a method to Methodism, right?
Yeah. Well, I do feel like, and trust me, I say this recognizing I'm not as good of a Christian or Methodist as I should be, but I feel like most of the problems that I've experienced as a pastor in terms of congregations struggling with Methodism is just boils down to they really haven't read or been exposed to John Wesley.
Enough.
Yeah.
Enough. Yeah, not enough, John Wesley. Yeah. There's another part, I think it kind of relates to that. There was this point when um like Rocky's trying to make a point to Adonis, and Adonis keeps talking. And Rocky says, you can't learn anything when you're talking. As long as you're talking, you're not listening.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh boy, do people need to hear that one.
yeah, yeah. Especially, I mean, yeah. Again, this comes back. I feel like the more I think about the issues of our culture, the issues in our churches, it just comes back to these same patterns. We don't pray as much. We don't sit in silence as much.
Yeah.
We are obsessed with materialism too much. We aren't disciplined. I mean, I feel like it's a recurring pattern that I see in my own life. I'm not gonna step out of it myself.
Yeah, don't right. I mean, we can't, you and I, right? You
Yeah.
know, like Paul says, I am the worst of, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Like how often have I bought something and said, "Man, I could have looked a little longer and found something half the cost, or I could have gone to a discount store, or I could have waited. I could have waited six
or
more months for this."
did
And
I even really need that,
yeah, yeah, like I think I really feel like I don't it sounds weird, but I wonder sometimes if, and trust me, as a person with a disability, I recognize I go far back in time. I don't get to exist because the stuff that was needed to take care of me right after I was born didn't exist even a generation before I was born.
Mhm.
But I do wonder if we live, well, I should, in the Western world, let's put it that way, in American Western world, most of us live lives that are so comfortable or can be so comfortable and numbing that we don't have to challenge ourselves, and we don't challenge ourselves, and that leads to more problems because human beings need to be challenged to grow. We have to be challenged. We have to be tested. We have to push ourselves. And we live in a world where you can kind of go through life and never really have to radically push yourself or really change. You know?
Yeah. So some would say we've grown soft.
Yes. Yeah. No, no, don't go on the internet and find a loud man screaming at you about how wussy you are. I mean, there's an extreme the other way. Compassion is not a vice. Let's go.
All right. Uh,
So, you know,
anyway.
we come out of the Anglican tradition that like to call itself the via media, the middle way. I think for most things in life, you need to find a balance. And
And I agree.
there's a balance between, running 500 miles a day and screaming at people that don't, and the other side of sitting on your couch too much and never getting off of it.
Just eating Cheetos, yeah. Yeah, yeah. And what is the balance? I think you already touched on it. The balance is discipline, right?
Yeah.
The balance is saying, okay, I really want to sit on the couch today and eat Cheetos, but I need to go take a walk,
Yeah.
you know?
It's, I do think a lot of it, for me at least, I do much better when I keep focused on what I want a year from now or what I want 5 years from
Right.
now. Then, because again, you probably could speak to this a lot about your weight loss journey. I can speak about it when I've lost weight or gotten in better shape. Is it doesn't show up the first day you do it. It doesn't show up the 100th day you do it, but it will show up, 3, 4 years down the road if you're consistent.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, and that's funny because you said that like it doesn't show up the first day, and it just reminded me of a story. And I'm a little off on a tangent here, but when my 14-year-old son, who's going into high school now, I took him to orientation for kindergarten,
yeah,
12 plus 13 years ago, right? Whatever it was, not that long, 9 years ago.
yeah,
Um, and as I was taking him, the day I was taking him to orientation for kindergarten. He says, Dad, I want to learn to read. Okay, good. So then we went into orientation, we sat together, and then they took the kids off to the classroom and they sat with the adults for a few minutes. And we go to the classroom and all the kids are sitting and they're sitting on the rug with their hands in their laps and going, who are these children? Right. But then we get in the car afterwards. He says, Dad, I didn't learn to read yet.
yeah. Wait, what? What?
You
Yeah,
haven't even started school yet, son.
you gotta hold up there. Yeah,
Just take a deep breath. But we live in it. That's our culture, though, isn't it?
yeah,
I mean, that's a culture where, everything is at your fingertips.
yeah,
And, if I need to know something, it's this far away, right? If I want something, I can get it. I'm ordered on Amazon, it'll be here tomorrow, you know, or
yeah.
maybe
And
even today.
yeah. Well, and I feel like for most of us, especially in America, we have all had this experience. And after I talk about this experience, recognize with me for a moment how crazy this experience is. So there's been a point at which I can guarantee you almost everybody that's listening to this, there's been a point at which you're heating something up in the microwave and you're mad because it's taken too long, right? And yet there is nothing that you put in that microwave that's anywhere close to how long it would take if you had to cook it any other way.
Right.
So like if it's 3 minutes, 5 minutes, it would have taken you over an hour to cook it in the oven. So why are you that upset? And yet we've all had that experience. You're like, come on, just and it speaks again to this idea we live in a culture in which it's about it had to happen yesterday, and life doesn't work that way.
I'll tell you an exact experience I had like that.
Yeah,
When I was first married, we lived in Pennsauken, which
yeah,
is near to Camden, near to Philadelphia, traffic is traffic, right?
Yeah.
And we were used to a lot of traffic. And then when I took my first full-time appointment, I went to Quinton. Now, do you know where Quinton is?
Mm.
Quinton is Salem County. It's south of where I am now, okay?
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
my neighbors had horses and cows,
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
I would come out of the house and I'd go up to up the side street to the main road that went past the church, it got to a point when I was down there, when I would come up to the side street, if I had to wait for two cars to go by, I'm like, oh, come on, man. For two cars, whereas living in Pennsauken, 10, 15, 20, you're waiting there 5 minutes before you can get out on the highway.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's context, right? That's contextual. But still, it's like, what is your level of impatience here? You know? And I think society has taught us to be less patient than
Absolutely.
we ever were before.
It's
And
not.
I think that plays again back into this whole idea of discipline, right?
Well, it's. I don't think it's. I also would argue it hasn't made us better.
Um,
Uh,
I could agree with that. Yeah. Yeah.
um. Yeah. I mean, I think too. Another quote that spoke to me is. I'm sure it does with you because we both have adopted children. But the idea of the family is what you make it. That that statement there, family is what you make it.
Yeah.
And and I think what's interesting is I've been thinking a lot about this comment in connection to the idea of the church as a family. And I know there's some danger there when we throw around church family too much. Sometimes there's issues. But I really think about the fact that some of this impatient stuff is impacting our ability to grow the church. Because I was talking to a parishioner recently, actually just today, and I gave a sermon on Sunday that I talked about how my church, Lacey and I Methodist Church, does an amazing amount of stuff in the community. Does a lot of homeless stuff, does a
Mhm.
lot of soup. I mean, they just do amazing stuff. And I said to the church, I'm like, I'm very proud of what you do. But what you have to recognize, we're going through Acts right now for kind of the summer series. I said, what you have to recognize is we're called to do mission, but we also have to infuse it with evangelism. We have to tell the story and do the actions in a way that we help people recognize we're feeding you, not just because you're hungry, but also because we're called to do it because we serve the God, the loving God of the universe that wants to be in relationship with you.
Right.
And he asked me, he goes, I'm kind of worried about that because a lot of our funding we get from the state or we get from the federal government and we can't do evangelism. I make a commitment that we won't do evangelism. And I said, I'm not asking anybody to walk up and give somebody a tract. I'm not asking anybody to yell and scream at somebody about, do you know Jesus? That kind of evangelism doesn't work. All I'm asking you is to be more conscious about creating relationships with the people that you're doing ministry with.
Right.
So, so when you feed them, try to also sit down next to them while they eat and just talk to them and just get into a relationship with them. And
Right.
I'm like, if you sit down in front of them and go, um, I'm going, but in your head, you're going, by the end of this conversation, I'm going to tell them about Jesus. It's going to fall apart. But if you just sit down in front of them and say, I honestly want to know this person in front of me. I want to start building a relationship with this person. I said, that's where great evangelism comes from, is just a desire to get to know somebody.
Hmm.
But I was telling them that to do really good evangelism, you have to be okay with the fact that this is going to be a stepping process, right? There's going to be steps to this. I'm first going to sit down and I'm just going to get to know Don. I'm just going to let him know that I'm here, that I care about him, and honestly I'm going to show him that I'm curious about his life and getting to know who he is.
Right.
Then I'm going to keep doing that for a while until he figures out I'm going to be consistent in his life and he can trust me and he can believe what I say. And then at some point I go, the Holy Spirit will open up a possibility where Don starts talking about the fact he just lost his wife or the fact that he just lost his job. And then you have the ability, right, to then go, oh, well, when I've been in bad places, the church has really been a benefit to me. Would you want to come to church with me on Sunday?
Right.
But that's like 3 or 4 steps down the road.
Right. Or it even gets to a point where people just, like, okay, I get it. You're interested in me. You want to know, but what is your motivation?
Yeah,
Right. At
yeah,
some point it gets to that. It either gets to what is your motivation, or they're just pouring their heart out enough where you have that
yeah,
opportunity to just, say, hey, here's what works for me.
yeah,
You're right. But and again, you're right in that it's a process.
yeah,
It's, uh, um, we have an evangelism committee
yeah,
at Asbury. And when I came in, the evangelism committee's been kind of dormant. They haven't been doing a whole lot.
yeah,
And I said, well, I want to change your focus. And she says, what do you mean? I said, I want the evangelism committee not to be evangelists. I want you to teach other people how to be evangelists. I want you to teach the church how their story ought to be part of what they do, you
yeah,
know, rather than you being responsible for the evangelism, being responsible for everyone else, because Jesus calls us all to tell our story,
absolutely.
right? And so if we have an evangelism committee, it shouldn't be their job to be the evangelists. It should be their job to teach everyone else to be the evangelists, And she looked at me, she went, no one's ever put it that way for me. I said, maybe that's the problem.
Well,
Maybe.
it's this reality that studies have shown us that randomly knocking on people's doors or standing in parks and debating religion doesn't effectively evangelize people.
No.
What effectively evangelizes people is you have a real relationship with them, and then that can lead to a deeper conversation about life and about faith.
Right.
But to get there, you can't rush that. You actually have to just be honestly wanting to get to know that person in front of
Yeah.
you. And again, I think we live in a world where, well, I can't put that on a spreadsheet. I can't,
Can you give me that in bullet points? Yeah.
I can't check that off. What do you mean? It's like, no, just love and talk to the person in front of you. That's it.
Yeah.
That, we're
Yeah.
starting.
That's relational evangelism. That's what we're taught about it, right? It's relational evangelism.
Yeah,
All right. We're getting close to time here.
okay,
So we got to talk about next week. Which, for friends, if you haven't seen Creed, good film.
yeah,
Well worth a watch. And again, you might come at it as, oh, okay, here's one of these sports movies, and there's not really a lot to, it's not like you're watching, what was it, Facing the Giants. I don't know if you've seen that one, but it's a very overtly Christian sports film,
oh
about a football coach at a Christian high school, that kind of thing, so it's a very, very overtly Christian type of thing. This not so much, and yet still, as a sports film, still has plenty enough themes there for you to dig into, friends. So um, definitely worth a watch. So let's talk about uh, films that films I've seen and you haven't. I'm going back to the list again. All right.
okay,
So films. No, wait, we did one that I haven't seen. So this would be ones I have seen.
yeah.
Oh, you said before you hadn't seen Donnie Darko.
No, I haven't.
Okay. That's a great cycle. It's not a horror film.
Yeah,
It is one of Jake Gyllenhaal's earliest films. And a very sort of psychological, kind of twisty,
yeah.
trippy film. So why don't we watch that this week?
Okay.
Let's see if I can see where it's at. Um Darko. It's a 2001 film.
Yeah.
And right now it is on Tubi and Peacock and Pluto TV and Sling TV. So it's out there. And it's free on Tubi and Peacock. So
Yeah.
well, Peacock's not free, but it's on Peacock.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty wild film. So
Yeah, I've heard of it, so yeah, I'm kind of aware of it. Yeah.
yeah, and again, not a horror movie, but definitely a little psychological kind of. So that'll be fun because I don't know what we might pull out of that one. So I'm gonna have to watch it again myself.
It's a challenge,
It's
right?
gonna be a little challenging. We'll see. And maybe, at some point we can go Evan into coming back on at some point.
I think you should have to do like pick 8 movies in a row.
Yeah. That'll be fun. All right, friends. Until next week, thanks for watching. Keep on looking for God in the dark. We'll see you all next week. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for watching the Finding God in the Dark podcast. If you're enjoying these discussions, please consider hitting the like button down below or subscribing to follow along. We put out weekly episodes on Friday mornings, and we are so glad that you're finding this discussion of theology and film entertaining enough to follow along with us. Take care and God bless, friends.